All right, we're back. We have partial power, Captain. It's COMP305, and it's fall 2016, and we're week 1, part 2 of our broadcast, and we've had to jury rig a monitor to make it work. That's okay. You know, to me, the fun part about this is, you know, you learn stuff when things aren't working properly. All right, so so here we are, and what we're going to be doing is we talked about tool sets. I need to talk about the book a little bit. I think that's important. So let's talk about the book that I'm going to be using for this course. The book is called Unity 5X Game Development Blueprints. You can certainly buy it from Amazon, but it's available through Pact Books. No, not 2D Game Development Blueprints. It's the wrong one. It's 5D Game Development, 5X Game Development Blueprints through Pact, which is a different book altogether, right? The reason why I'm using this one, not that one. Actually, I'll look at Pact Books. Pub. Pact Pub is, they've got lots of crazy books, and the one I'm looking for is Unity 5.x. And the one I'm looking at is this one. This is the book that I'm using it. It's 20 bucks. I think it's US, right? 20 bucks US. Well, hold on. It'll be even cheaper in a second. So it's 20 bucks US if you want to buy it and have a PDF version of your textbook. I think it's a great textbook. It kind of talks about the first part is 2D, like we're going to be doing, and the second part is 3D. So it kind of aligns with the, you know, the aspects of the course that we want to use. So I think it's a great book to get. There are other ways of getting it. You don't have to buy it. You can certainly go to Toronto Public Library, right? And if you go to torontopubliclibrary.ca and put in that book, if I go Unity 5X, and if you have a Toronto Public Library card, we're going to talk about that in a bit, you can see that it's available, right? So you can download it, right? And you can access it online. Right? Now you can't download it. If you go this way, you can't actually download the book and have it as a PDF, but it's the same. Like you can read it online, right? So anything that I'm going to be doing is online. You can access it here, right? You can also buy it through Amazon and other places. I think it's a worthwhile book. Normally I don't recommend books because they're, you know, technology moves so quickly, right? And a lot of the stuff we can learn for Unity is right online on the Unity Learn website. So if you actually want to learn about Unity, you can certainly go up to Unity 3D, and then if you go into /learn, right, there's a ton of tutorials and everything else up on their website to learn all about Unity creation of games and stuff. We'll be going through some of these tutorials together, right? Everything from scripting, API, the whole thing, it's all up online. They're really, the books, what they do is they focus you on some, you know, some ways of creating stuff, but a lot of the stuff here is all up online. Okay, so totally cool. I think, and they're continually adding new things to the Unity Learn website. It's a great resource for us. But the book we're going to be following, again, like I said, if I go back to this one, is I'm going to be going through chapter by chapter, pretty much. And the thing about the book, in my opinion, the good thing about the book is that it follows the methodology that I want to follow. It's hard to find a book in Unity that kind of covers game development. So here's game. Here's what about game? Let's talk about the, you know, things around the game. Like for example, our coordinate systems and vectors and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't cover those things, right? Necessarily. And also, we're also going to want it to cover Unity. So that plus Unity, you know, and everything else. This is a great lab manual for what we're going to be doing. That's why I recommend it. Is it required? I wouldn't say it's required because we'll be covering it with you anyway in the course. But it's definitely, if you follow this book, you can't go wrong. It'll teach you everything you need to know for the course, and then some. And I think it's pretty well written. It's written in a project-based style, so you create a project every chapter, which I think is a really cool thing. And then it can come up. You can come up with something really cool at the end. Okay, so that's the book we're going to be using. On that, one of the things that Toronto Public Library gives us, and I kind of did this at the end of the last one, but I'm going to talk about it now because we're talking about resources, right? How to get your resources to learn. I highly recommend accessing the Toronto Public Library link for lynda.com, right? If you have a Toronto Public Library card and you have your library card and your PIN, and you can get that for free if you're a resident of Toronto or Ontario, actually, anywhere in Ontario, Brampton, London, whatever. If you have a Toronto Public Library card or a library card, you can access the full access to lynda.com in terms of exercise files, videos, training, and everything else. Some of the stuff we're going to be talking about in this course, you know, you may want to do things like with Maya, if you want to use Maya as a game creation, you know, tool set, because Autodesk, like we talked about, has free downloads for Maya, right? I can't cover Maya, but you know, the library here on lynda.com has Maya. So if I search for Maya, right, on lynda.com, you can see that there is Maya 2017 Essential Training, right? There's all kinds of stuff on Maya. There's the same thing when it comes to, and this is all free for you guys, right? It's not like it's going to cost you anything. If you want to learn about Unity Essentials, I think this is a great website to learn about that as well. How to build things with scripting with Unity and C#, debugging scripts with Unity, and all this other stuff. So again, this is a game programming course. It's not a Unity course, but we're using Unity as a tool set. And I think this is a great resource for you to do additional learning. You're going to say, Tom, this is my only course. This sounds like hours and hours of learning. Yeah, it is, right? But to be a good developer, you need to do some of your own training, right? I will guide you through as much as I can. That's my job. My job is to make sure you have as much guidance as I can give you. But you also need to do your own little training so that way you patch up the holes of your knowledge in order for you to be as effective as possible. And a tool set like this is one that I recommend. There are others, like Pluralsight. I think Pluralsight has all kinds of tools that you can learn from them as well. There's a cost to them when you're learning app development. And also, another tool set that I enjoy is 3D Motive. So if you go 3D Motive, they also have some really cool tutorials. Again, not free, but really cool tutorials about creating games and using really cool tool sets like 3D Studio Max and Maya. And how to create stuff. They give you some really cool tutorials on to make anything you want to make. Highly recommend it. It's not free, right? But the reason why I'm showing this kind of stuff is because you know, some of the people that I know that, you know, that's what they do. All they do is games. Is they use 3D Motive, you know, other tutorial engines like that as well. Why Unity and why not Unreal? That's why I got sometimes too. Unreal is a really cool engine. And it uses C++, and it's got really cool lighting, and it looks a little bit more professional, some people say, than Unity. Unity, you can tell Unity from a mile away. 3D Studio, you know, Unreal, you can't tell. You're right. And there's a lot of stuff that's really cool about Unreal. Unreal is a little bit more complex in some ways in that you need to know C++ if you want to really get down and dirty with it. Although it has some really awesome blueprints, right? You can do everything with blueprinting in Unreal, and you don't have to code a damn thing, right? And a lot of people do that. They make games fully with blueprinting and Unreal. Unreal is also free. So if I was going to go to Unreal Engine download, right, it's going to take you to Rockstar. Rockstar Games are the people that make this stuff, right? So here's Unreal. It is free to download. It's big, right? But you know what? You can make 3D worlds in Unreal that are awesome and cross-platform, right? I have to say, though, that the stuff I've done with Unity, when it comes to 2D stuff, I'm really happy with Unity. I think Unity does awesome 2D stuff. And it's a little bit more challenging to do in Unreal. I don't think Unreal does it quite the same way as Unity, and they have taken a completely different approach. The other new kid on the block from an engine perspective is Lumberyard. So Amazon Lumberyard, right? It's a free download again. As of the last time I looked at it, and I haven't had a chance to really delve into it too deeply, it's only for PC. So it doesn't work for Mac. And that's okay, because neither does 3D Studio Max. 3D Studio Max is only for PC, not for Mac, right? But they also have a really cool engine, and people have been reviewing it saying that it's free, it's open source, and you can use it to make really awesome games and you know, models. And it's a really cool thing. It's a game engine and a modeler all kind of wrapped into one, and you can totally download everything for free. And Amazon is, you know, one of the most powerful companies in the world. They're supporting it. You know it's going to go far. I'm really waiting for something to come out from Google, right? I mean, Amazon's got theirs. Microsoft's partnering with with Unity, right? Microsoft? I don't know. Amazon's pretty darn huge. So I think Google is going to do something else. Maybe Google's going to align with Unreal or something like that. But Google's got SketchUp. Google's got their own SketchUp modeler, right? So they have their own modeling engine. You can do a lot with SketchUp, but you know, everyone aligns with something, and I think you know, who knows what's going to happen with Google or those other companies. But Microsoft's pretty much in bed with Unity. I think it's you know, they've kind of decided. That's why Visual Studio and Unity work so nicely together and stuff as well. So I think it's that's kind of the direction that things have been going these days. There are several other AAA game engines out there that we can't cover, that are not free and that are awesome. That, you know, they're not in part of this course. This course is not about game engines, it's about game creation. Like, you know, game programming is what it's about. All right, let's get into Blender. I want to talk about Blender because one of the first things we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Blender, you know, to create assets for Unity as part of our asset creation pipeline. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is download and install Blender, and it takes about, I think it's about 60 megs of space, you know, to download and install Blender. Let's take a look at this thing. So here's Blender. All right, my version is 2.77. Your version might be 2.76 on the machine in front of you. It's okay, right? Here's what you need for Blender, okay? 100%. You need a 3-button mouse. If you're a person who likes to use the trackpad or the touchpad, get a mouse. Get a 3-button mouse, right? You don't have to get a Logitech mouse or a gaming mouse, but you need a 3-button mouse if you're going to use Blender, all right? And you're going to need a 3-button mouse if you're going to use Unity. Both those things are required. I have my beautiful Apple mouse, my Magic Mouse. It's not good enough for using things with Blender in Unity. You need a 3-button mouse. Please get one. That's number one. The other thing you really need, and I highly recommend, is a keyboard with a numpad, all right? If you don't have a number pad on your keyboard, you're going to be at a disadvantage. You need it, all right? So if you have a laptop and you don't have a numpad, right? This is a Belkin numpad, if I'm not wrong. That's where I got it from. And if I look at Amazon, so if I go to Amazon.ca, my favorite shop now. I don't go to the different malls anymore. I just go shop on Amazon for everything. Plum is the best deals for everything you want, right? I don't work for Amazon, by the way, but I'm just telling you. So if I go numpad, number pad, for, you know, kind of thing, for laptop, there's several different options. They're not that expensive. Like you can see, like they're 20 bucks. I want to see the one that I got, if it's still here. They have different ones. That looks very similar to the one I got, you know. But mine has, it looks somewhat like this, like a number pad. And why do you need one? Because there's a lot of shortcut keys that make your life a lot easier when you have a number pad that's separate from everything else. Some of them include a calculator. It doesn't have to be a complex numpad. It doesn't have to be wireless like mine is. You know, it could be any one of these things. But I highly recommend when you're programming with Blender and with Unity, you know, you have a number pad. And I think I'm just going through them. So I was trying to see if there's anything out there that, I think there's one from Belkin. So I think it's Belkin. Belkin. If I can spell Belkin numpad. Right. And there's some other ones that are here. Apple also has some other ones up online, but the ones that you want are something like this that gives you, you know, the number pad. And they vary between like 20 bucks, like you can't go wrong, and it'll arrive within a day or two, right? Which is good. Look, if I order today, Tuesday, September 13th, I'm going to get it. Right, it's not like that long before you get one. You can also find them at the stores. This is Satechi, actually. Satechi. See, I'm telling you to get Belkin. I'm getting Satechi. Satechi. They don't have it here. Let's see if they have other ones. Sorry, just want to make sure that you have other stuff that's part of the thing. And they really look cool, and they're really you know, useful, and I'll show you why in a second, but I want to see if I can find that one that I have, right? But there it is. So this one now it actually says $38.99. The one I have, it's the exact same one, right? It says it's for MacBook Air and Mac Mini and whatever, but it actually is. I think it will still work. Something like this will still work with, with your machine, your PC. Okay, if you don't have one, so you don't have to get this one. You can get other ones. Okay, why a numpad? I'm just going to kind of kill all these things for a second. And you're going to say, I never needed it before. Can I reprogram Blender? Yes, you can. You can do all that. You can repurpose Blender so it doesn't need a numpad. But the beautiful thing is the numpad does the following things. If I was going to show you, and I've shown this in the morning class. So I'm pressing the 1 button on the numpad, and I get, hold on a second, this. Sorry. So what I'm getting is it switches it to the front, right? So if you notice, this is the front view. And if I go to 7, that's the top view. If I go to 3, that's the right view, right? So the great thing is with 1 click, you're switching views, and we want to use different view sets, right? So when I look at the viewport itself in Blender, and by the way, notice that my mouse in Blender is in the middle of the viewport here, right? I have this right panel, the bottom panel, and the left panel. Wherever my mouse is, that's the active panel. When I hover over that panel, it switches the active panel to wherever I'm on. So this is the active panel now. If I was going to go over here and press a button, it's not going to be the same as if I'm over here and pressing the same button. Okay, so please be aware of that with Blender. All right, so the numpad, again, it allows us to look at things from different viewports. Notice that on the top left corner, it also shows right perspective, right? Perspective means it's still giving me a bit of perspective. If I press the 5 on the numpad, guys, don't watch me. Pull up Blender and do this, all right? Because you're not going to learn. And if I test you in a real life scenario, you're going to be really slow. So pull up Blender. The machine in front of you has Blender. Please do it, right? So you can practice with me. That's what we're here to do, right? So press 5. 5 moves from perspective to orthographic mode. So it's fully flat with 5. All right, so again, if I go 1 is front, 3 is right, 7 is top, right? And we're going to go through these views, okay? And 5, it switches from perspective to orthographic mode, so fully flat. And sometimes we want to model in orthographic mode because it's too complex for us to model an object in 3 dimensions. It's just too hard, right? And the reason for this is our eyes think that the model, that we're moving an object to the right, but actually we're moving it to the right and down, or to the right and up. We can't see where our mouse is. Our mouse is trying to operate in 3 dimensions, but our screen is flat, right? So it's not quite doing what we want to do sometimes. So be aware of that. It'd be great if one day we have augmented reality and we're looking through some kind of device, and so I can push an object in 3 dimensions, and move it around. Then we won't need to do this, right? But for now, maybe we will, who knows? But for now, it's, we don't have 3 dimensions. Our things aren't projected in front of us so far, so we need some kind of way of switching between views. All right, so if I want to switch back, so I'll switch back to perspective mode, and I want to rotate. I want to rotate around. I want to kind of pan around here, right? The way to do that, of course, is I'm using the right mouse button, the middle scroll wheel. If I scroll, hold on a second here. If I go in and out, I can scroll in and out with my scroll wheel. As long as my mouse cursor, right, my mouse pointer is in the middle of the screen, I can scroll in and out, so zoom in and out, no problem. If I push the button down, let me stand up to do this. So if I push the button down here, right, like this, I actually click the button in and rotate. Get the wrong one. Let's do this over here. There. Click the button down and rotate. What I'm doing is I'm panning, or I'm swiveling around the whole screen, right? There we go. So I've got a 360 perspective on the entire object, right? So, but I got to click the button in, right, in order for me to do that. Okay. So I'm just talking about navigation here, right? So I'm navigating by kind of going through, by clicking here and moving around, all right? Okay, what if I messed up and I'm somewhere I don't want to be, like I'm maybe way out here and I don't see anything. I'm like, Tom, oh my God, I lost my stuff. I don't know where it is, right? Well, another thing that this little thing does is whatever is highlighted, if I press the dot, right? And it's like, boom, it's right there again, right? So I don't have to lose it. As long as it's highlighted, as long as it's selected, I can get back to where I was, right? And it'll go right up there. So that's one thing I can do. The other thing that it does is I can move from again, this is my numpad. I can move from, instead of pressing the dot, I press the dot or the decimal, if you will, on the numpad. That's how I got that. So here's the decimal again. If I want to move from this perspective to the camera view, right? I press the 0, and now I see what the camera sees, right? So I can toggle between what the camera sees and what I see. So this is what I see when I'm modeling. Press the 0, this is what the camera sees. So I can move back and forth. I can toggle back and forth between that. It's a very cool little option, right? What I want to do when I'm doing that is sometimes I can model here in this view. I have the grid to help me, right? But then what the camera sees is really important because that's what's going to be rendered, right? The camera, notice when I first start off Blender, I have 3 objects in the scene, right? So my scene, let me go back. My scene is a container that contains objects, game objects, right? It's a container. But each game object is itself a container, right? Even though it's showing one shape right now, the cube, right? It's actually a container that can contain many shapes, or shapes that are broken up into not just the cubes, but other things, other triangles or vertices and faces and stuff. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so I want you to think about the scene, this scene here, as the main scene. All right, so Blender, we can move around, again, pan around. If I was to press the Shift key, and if I scroll, right, so scroll with my wheel and press the Shift key, it moves me up and down, right? If I press the Control key and scroll, it moves me right and left. This is really important, right? So sometimes you want to move it, and if you notice I can kind of snap my little roller ball, right? My scroll key, my scroll wheel kind of moves in chunks, so it doesn't move smooth. It kind of moves like chunk, 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 which is kind of cool. Same thing here. So all the things, this is kind of free moving when I kind of click in there, right? Here's something to note about Blender. You do not left click to select in Blender. You right click, right? Can you change this this sequence? Can you do it so that way you don't have to use your right click? You want to use left click? Yes, you can adjust this. And I think I think you guys you took Blender a little bit with Ina. Did you go into this detail with you? How much detail did it go into?
Yeah, so I think that was right. But yeah.
Because you're the only one that took intro to game and simulation, right? And you did too, right? So if you guys took this is kind of an intro. Some people didn't, so please bear with me. This is the day we're going to do it, right? So if it's going to be a review for you guys because you've already had it. Some people in the room, if you're not a gaming student, you probably wouldn't have done intro to game and simulation, so you wouldn't have had this stuff, right? So you guys have the advantage in this case in terms of creating stuff. I'm going to show you some different things, right?
No one has
Well, it's tough. I don't know if you guys did. You guys do full games with Blender?
we did a lot. Yes.
Fantastic. So you guys are going to be way miles ahead when it comes to asset. Give you guys 5 to 10% more if you do your own assets, if you actually make your own assets. But there's no disadvantage to anybody else because I got to go through all this stuff anyway. So again, I'm doing an intro to Blender today, but only from an asset creation perspective. Okay, so is really cool. Again, there's 3 things that we have here. We have our light. I'm right-clicking. We have our camera. I'm right-clicking. And we have our cube, right-clicking. Okay? So please try and select these things. That's what I'm doing. Notice also, if I click away, there's also something else that's in the middle here, which is our 3-dimensional cursor. Our 3-dimensional cursor is cool, right? Here's our 3-dimensional cursor, and it's kind of right in the middle of our screen. And it's right now, it's sitting at the origin. That's what it's called. The origin for everything in Blender is 0, 0, 0. X, Y, and Z. Okay? Notice how my light seems to be at the top right corner. If I want to turn things off so you can't see them, but they're still on the scene, I can use the outliner right here on the right to turn the camera off and the lamp so you don't see it. It's still there, and it's still selected. I can select things here in the outliner as well as in the scene, right? Right now, I want to select my cube, right? So I left-click to select here, right-click to select in the scene. All right. Notice also there's these arrows. This is the manipulator arm. The arrows point to different coordinates, right? Or different axes, if you will, right? So the red arrow always, if you click on the actual red arrow itself, right? It actually moves or constrains the object to translate across the x-axis, right? If I do green arrow, it translates across the y-axis, right? And the blue arrow translates across the z-axis. Okay, so nice and easy. This is the way we move our object in three-dimensional space, right? Now remember, one thing to note is this, that in Blender, so for people that are already Blender fanatics, right? In Blender, the beautiful thing is that it's Z up. In Unity, it's Y up, right? So it's a totally different thing. It's you're gonna blow your mind now.
Why not just standard?
It's never standardized. I'm so sorry, but in the same thing with Maya. Maya is actually Y up. So if you were going to use Y up to just to use things, you can definitely use Maya as part of your your pipeline, and then take stuff from Maya and put it into Unity. No problem. It imports nicely, and it's got the same kind of interface when it comes to how objects in 3D are rendered, right? And same thing with 3D Studio Max. However, in Unreal, it's Z up, right? So the thing for you to do is not worry about that. Don't sit there and go like, oh God, how come it's Y up and not Z up, or whatever. Who cares? You can always change the tool to align for you, right? The idea is that at the end, the player is going to be able to play, and they don't care. Y up, Z up, as long as it works for them, they don't care what it is, right? From a modeling perspective, it's important to note. Here's the other thing. Here in the tabs, okay, when we import stuff into Unity, now this is specific to Unity, right? Remember that we have different tab sets here, right? When I'm selecting an object here, this is a cube, this is context sensitive, right? But I also have a bunch of these tabs. The tabs that the one I want to focus on is the third one from the left, which is the scene tab. If I click on the scene tab, notice that I have my scene has got a camera and my background. Oh, hey, there's the units. Right now, it says none. That means that the default is set to Blender units. Blender units have no meaning in Maya or in Unity or anything like that. We need to switch from none to metric in order for us to work things off in Unity, okay? Otherwise, your proportions will be off, right? If you want it to be the same proportions in Blender, the things you render in Blender, and in Unity, you need to have your units as metric. For now, don't worry about this because we're going to get to it. When we export from Blender to Unity, we're going to be able to. We have to change this from none to metric. Okay. Other things to note. If I want more specific details, like right now, I'm just moving this by eye, right? If I press the N key, right, the N key brings up the transform window or the numeric window. That's what it does. And I want to point this out to you guys so you guys understand this too. In Blender, that we can do things by eye, but it's way better if we do things, numerically, right? Notice that it's shifted from, if I go to none, right, it goes from no units at all to metric. If I was going to build a house with Blender, by the way, Blender would not be used to build a house or model things like that. We probably use AutoCAD or something like that, right? If I go to Imperial, it actually gives you feet, and I can separate the units, feet and inches. So if you really want to render something realistically, and you want to make a house with Blender, you could. You could kind of render, like if you want to go to your house and render it, say, oh, how big is this room? Measure it in terms of feet, because we talk about feet and inches now in construction, right? We even in Canada, right? Even though we're supposed to be metric. So how many feet does this room have? You could kind of measure the room and kind of figure it out, and then draw it out. How big is this wall? How, there's a little bit of a niche in this wall. How big is that wall? Is it a foot? Probably not. It looks like less than a foot, maybe 8 inches. You can actually measure everything, model everything to scale if you really want to. Will it turn out exactly the same? No, probably not exactly the same, but it'd be very close. And if you really work on it, you can make it as exact as you want, right? So units are really, really important when it comes to modeling, because we want to try and keep things in perspective, and we also want to keep things scaled properly. Oh man, I made a mistake. What am I going to do? I moved this thing way out here, and maybe I added something else, and I have got another one. I made a mistake. What do? Start over. File, new. And you have to hover over this reload startup file to start over again. So new. Again, I want to hide my view. I want to hide my cube, and I want to hide my lamp. I want to hide my camera. I can hide it all, and I can show them again, right? One thing to note is this. Right now, we're looking at the default setup for the view. So this is the layout, if you will, right, for the viewport. I sometimes would like to make my own custom views. So I'm going to click on this plus button, right? And actually, if you notice, I've got a bunch of these, right, views. We're going to get into those in a second. But I want to make a new one. So I want to go to my default view and click plus. It goes 001. I'm going to make this, I'm going to call this like Tom's workbench. You can call it whatever you like, or HUD. You know, here's my Tom's. Now what I want to do is like, see these little marks here on the corner of your screens. What you can do is you can kind of tear away these views to kind of create additional views, right? An example is if I want to make this like, if I want to go here like this, right? I can totally split this up into 4 screens. Now, why would I want to do that, right? The great thing about this is, well, sometimes I want a 4-up, right? And let me discuss this a little bit. On the left, let's say I want to make this the top view. You can align this the way you like, right? But I want to make this the top view. I can do that. Remember, I can go to wherever my mouse goes, right, is what's the active screen. So if I go here, that's the active screen right now. And I can sit there and go, well, I want this to be the top view. And I want it to be an orthographic, right? Cool. All right, and now I want this one to be the main 3D view, but I want this one to be the front view. Let's do this, the front view. And by the way, it aligns with my buttons, right? So 7 on the top left, 1 on the bottom left for the front, and 3 for the bottom right, right? This is how I would set it up. And if, let's say I make it again, I want to make all these ortho, right? Because orthographic means flat, right? And now this will be my perspective view, right? So if I want to kind of hug this down a little bit, and let's get rid of some of these other screens. So over here, let's press T to get rid of this one. And over here, down here, let's press T to get rid of this one, and T to get rid of this one. So now I've got these 3 views, plus I got all this, right? And this is my 3D view. I can rebalance all these views if I want to, and I highly recommend you do this, guys, to make your own kind of view the way you like. So that way, what you can do is you can have this 3D view. So if I want to kind of zoom in here, I can zoom in here. It doesn't affect these ones, right? And I can hover around and do what I have to do. So I can see a preview of what my model is going to look like here. But here, I can actually do the work. An example of this would be here in my view. I'm going to kind of right-click here. And notice how the arrows are slightly different. And I want to move this across the y-axis in my right side. So I want to kind of do one of these. Watch. So I want to move this across the y-axis, right? So I can see it moving across all views because this represents the right side. So I want to move it from right to left, right? Or forward and back is what this is doing, right? And this one is the front, so I can move this right and left, right? Notice that this one doesn't change because it's still always looking at the right side, right? And if I want to move it up and down, I can do that too. I can move this up and down. And I can move this forward and back. That's what this does, forward and back, right? So it gives me the ability to see things in 3 dimensions and the ability for me to modify things. If you have a bigger screen, like if I have at home, I have a Thunderbolt display. So if you have enough room, if you have 37 inches or something like that, the great thing about that is when you're working at home, you can have almost like a separate screen for each one of these things. And actually, one of the ways people work is they have multiple screens, bigger screens, and I can put in one view in one screen and one view in the other screen, and you do all kinds of stuff. These views are tearaway, by the way. You don't have to keep them this way, right? If I click plus, right, you can see that my numeric one comes up. I can put it away, right? I can also take away this part here, the toolbar on the left, by pressing the T. So T toggles my toolbar on and off, and targets my numeric toolbar on and off, which is really, really cool. So I can create my workbench. And if I don't like this, I can always go back to default, right? So the great thing about this is you can arrange your stuff in any way you like, and you need to be able to do this to work comfortably in the tool. If I go back to my workbench one more time, and there's going to be other things we're gonna hit later on. Notice that we also have this little button up here, right? So these buttons allow us to change the view. So instead of 3D, we can go to something else, like a graph editor or an outliner or whatever. You can create your complete views because some of these already exist. Like for example, I have this one view over here, right? That already gives me my outliner. This is my outliner that outlines all the objects inside my scene, right? And this one here, if I hover over it again, this is my current editor. type, right? So if I kind of look through here, I can see that I have all the details for what my context sensitive properties on the right-hand side, right? So you can create your own. And you can also take them away if you really don't want them. You can hide them. We're not going to go into that right now, but if you really want to learn about that, you can also duplicate your views in different ways, right? All right, I'm going to go back. I made a mistake. I'm going to go back and start over. So how do I do that? Will it take away my problem? Can I go back to my default? Yeah, I can, right? Does my view exist anymore? My workbench? No, it doesn't, right? So be careful. Every time you make your own Blender file, if you want your own custom view template, you have to make it again. And that's okay. It works actually nicely. All right. So we talked about navigating in Blender. We talked about how to zoom in, zoom out, how to use your mouse, how to use your numeric keypad, which is totally important because we're going to be using this for modeling. We made a couple things that are really cool, like in terms of you know, kind of navigating through Blender. But one thing we haven't done really is do any kind of modeling at all. Before we get into that and before we take a break, I want to talk about the 3 things that all models have. Since you guys took Blender, what are the 3 things, 3 properties that all models have? Okay, how about the guys in the corner over there? I don't know everybody yet, but I know you. But how about our man in the corner? Talk to me. Tell me what all. If you look at every model that has 3 things, and I want you to think about it in terms of Blender. If I'm selecting things, here's a hint. If I'm selecting things in Blender, what things can I select? What is it? I love it. That's the correct answer. The correct answer is vertices, edges, and faces. You said it correctly. Those are great things. You're going to do great on your first quiz, right? And the reason for that is because we need to know that every model, whether it's a sphere, a cuboid object, or anything else, has vertices, edges, and faces, right? An example would be, if I look at this cube, as the edges meet, right, this point right here, it would be the vertex, right? And if you notice up here, you can see that there's 8 verts. That's what it shows us the details, right? And across this is the edge, and you see that there are, how many edges would there be, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 12, right? 12 edges. And how many do you see that there's, is it 12 or 16? I can't remember. And then if you look at faces, definitely a cube has 6 faces, right? And there's 12 triangles that make up this thing, 12 tries, right? Now you can see that if you look at the number of objects, this is number of object 1 out of 3. Lamps 0 out of 1 are selected. And memory allocation right now for this scene is 8 meg, right? Just for this scene, okay? So one of the things this does is it tells us the details, right, about what this thing is and how heavy it is. The more verts there are and the more triangles and faces, the heavier the object is, and it's not game ready. Our game ready objects have to be low poly objects. Objects that have a low number of polygons. Why? The more polygons an object has, the longer it takes to render, and the heavier it is on the CPU from a CPU utilization perspective. So we want to keep that down. We can model. We can have amazing looking models. We can model them to death. And then what we want to do is we want to export the textures from those models and retexture a model that has a low, you know, kind of a low poly model that has a nice, beautiful texture on the top of it that makes it look like it's high poly. We're going to be talking about that throughout the course, right? But that's the kind of stuff we want. All right. So we talked about these edges, faces, and vertices. And the way to get there is I want to shift from object mode to edit mode, right? So I'm going to go to edit mode really quickly. And if you notice that when I'm in edit mode, I've got this thing kind of orangey. And this orangey yellow glow that it has right now is what tells us that it's selected. So this is what, so we see that this cube is fully selected right now, okay? If I want to deselect the cube, you press the A key, deselects everything, right? If I press A key again, it toggles everything back on. If I go back to object mode by pressing the tab key, so tab key takes us from object mode to edit mode. It toggles that on and off, right? And if I go back from my object mode, I can also do it down here. The keys I've been showing you right now so far, here's my object mode, and I can go from object mode to edit mode, right? So here's edit mode. I can do that as well, right? So the keys exist as well as the shortcut keys. Guys and girls, for you to be good at modeling, for you to be good at Unity, for you to be good at Unreal, Maya, whatever, you need to know the shortcut keys. even Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff. You can't, there's no way you can just go menu, click, menu, click, menu. It'd take too long. So we're going to need to know or learn or remember the shortcut keys in Blender. So tab gets us from object mode to edit mode. Again, we also have to make sure that when we move things, so if I translate stuff, I go back to object mode. If I translate up and down with my arrow keys, notice that on the bottom, I'm translating because my manipulator arm right now is set to translation. I can also set it to rotation, right? Here's the other thing I can do. So here's my rotation. So I can rotate it across this axis as well. I can rotate the object. Again, I'm translating it, but I'm changing the rotation aspect, right? So I can translate it across anything I want. And what I'm doing is I'm constraining it to this, right? Let me go back to, you know, again, this is translation from a motion perspective. I'm moving it across location. My location is changing, right? Here's another one. So down here, there's three. There's location, rotation, and what's the last one? Scale, right? And those are the other three properties you have to notice. If I can scale an object here in object mode too. So if I click on the green block at the end, I can scale an object so it's fatter. Or if I click on the Z, I can kind of make it thinner, right, if I want to. And the same thing goes, you know, if I want to make it, you know, not as wide, right? So I can make an object from a cuboid or a cube into a cuboid, right? So it kind of looks like this now. And I did this with rotation, or sorry, location, rotation, and scale, right? Now rotation, location, and scale also has shortcuts, right? So I'm going to start up a new file again, file new. And if I go to here and zoom in, I can, if I want to rotate this, I can press the R key, right? And it'll rotate anywhere I want, or I can limit it, I can constrain it with the axis. So I can go RX, and now it's constrained across the x-axis, right? If I click the y-axis, it constrains across the y-axis. So I can rotate it across the y-axis, right? And the same thing with the z-axis, right? So the constraints are there. So, all right, that's cool. I can also do the same thing with scale. I can press S, and I can scale the entire object up or down, make it smaller or larger across all axes. Or I can click X, so S and then X, and then I can scale it only across one axis, right? And if I press S again, and I can make it so that the whole thing scales, or I can scale only across one axis again, right? So I can create different shapes just by rescaling everything the way I want them. Hey, I'll let you know something. I recommend you don't scale stuff in object mode. I don't recommend that at all. Why? Because if you do that in object mode, it's been scaled, it's been changed. That means the original object size and position or whatever has been modified. I highly recommend you do it in edit mode instead, right? Because that would be, so my object, and I'll show you what I mean by this. If I press the N key now, you can see that the scale has been modified, right? It's 0.48 on the X, and 1 on the Y, and 2.942 on the Z. And what unfortunately for us is, if I go back to 1, right, it's going to put it back and make it into a cube. And sometimes what happens is you get that effect with Unity. So please be careful. When you want to rotate and scale and everything else, you want to try and do all of this inside your edit mode. Okay? Let's do that. Let's move in edit mode, right? So I'm going to kind of go into edit mode by pressing the tab key again. I'm going to deselect all, right? And I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to also change my position. The proper position here for movement, all right? So if I was going to go to moving things, right? I want to move things around. I'm going to just reposition myself for a second. Notice that, sorry, back in object mode for a second. Notice that the arrow to the right is the X arrow, and the arrow that goes up right now, in my perspective, is the Y arrow. This is the right way to think about aligning your object when you're modeling. Why? Because if you model it the other way around, it's going to be, you're going to have to rotate it again later on. So the proper way to do it is like this when you start off. I recommend. You don't have to, but I recommend you doing it this way. Okay, why? Now that everything's aligned in my viewport, if I press tab, and if I start doing something with this, I'm going to be aligning it here. Okay, when I'm pressing tab, again, I can select or deselect all, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm selecting or deselecting everything. When I select it, I get a context-sensitive menu that pops up over here inside edit mode. All right, what I want to do here before we take a break is I want to subdivide this a bunch of times. So I want to go over to the left, and I want to click on the subdivide button. And I want you to subdivide it 3 times exactly. All right, so there's some subdivided 3 times. What is this doing? It creates more detail for my object, right, that I can mess around with. There's my object detail right now. Okay, so again, I've gone in there. I'm going to start over so you can see that really quickly how I go in. I've realigned my object so that the right arrow is to this way, and the Y arrow, the red arrow and the green arrow are aligned this way. I've zoomed into my object. I've pressed Tab, right, and press A to deselect everything, right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to where it says Subdivide. Press A again to select it all. Click Subdivide, right, and then click 3 cuts. Right? So 3 cuts is going to look like this if you want to do what I'm doing to practice. Right? Okay, cool. Now I'm going to press A again to deselect all. And then we'll take a short break after this. All right, cool. Well, this is neat. I want to make a spaceship out of my cube. Right? Now you might say, wow, how are you going to make a spaceship out of a cube? For people who know how to do Blender, you know how. Right? But for people who don't know how to make Blender, I want to make it so that this part here is pointed. So this part is pointed up. I want to make this the back of my spaceship. I want to make the wings kind of go up here like this, and this is the front. And I'm also going to get rid of some of this cube stuff, but I'm going to show you how to do that. I made it on purpose this way so I can show you how to remove things as well. Okay. All right. So what I want to do right now, if I want to select stuff, I can select things by just clicking, right? And I'm selecting what? My vertex, right? Remember vertex, vertices, edges, and faces. If I want to select my edge, I want to press Control-Tab. It's going to bring up a little window, and I can click Edge, and then I can select my edges, right? So I can select my edges this way. If I press Control-Tab again, right, I can click Faces, and I can select my faces. There we go, Faces. So Face Select mode, right? All right, let me go back to Control-Tab to Vertices, so Vertex. Notice on the bottom, too, if you don't remember that shortcut, that there are the buttons for that. So vertex, edges, and faces. They exist down here as well. Okay? So if you forget that shortcut, it's right here. Okay, very cool. All right, so what I want to do is I want to select my vertex, this one. And what I want to do is I want to pull this out. And I'm kind of going to make this like, you know, like in the back of my spaceship. So I want to kind of pull this one out too. And I'm doing it by eye, which is a bad thing, right? I want to pull these ones in a little bit. So I'm going to kind of create a waist for my spaceship here. Kind of here's the waist, and then make this kind of align to the middle like this, right? So one of these kind of things. So you can see how it's kind of aligning. And this is going to be where the top of my spaceship is. Going to kind of put this like this, and, you know, make it kind of move in like this way. It's not kind of really good, is it? It's not right at all, right? And I kind of move this like this, and kind of put this. Why is this bad? It's not bad. It's just I'm doing it by eye. I'm kind of making the spaceship the way I want, but yet it's completely uneven, right? This is good, but what's even better is 2 things. If I'm trying to create the basic shape for my spaceship, I recommend going to a top view or some other kind of view. Let's go to the top view. And I'm going to move from perspective to orthographic. Like I talked about, this is a lot easier for us to align to than when I was doing it by eye and from a perspective mode. I also notice here that I've got additional pieces of my waist that aren't exactly accurate, right? Let's press in our number pad, and I can see that some of this stuff is malaligned. Like for example, my X is 1.265. Let's make this 1.25, right? And I'm also going to make my Y, leave out my Y at 1 and my -1 and my Z at 1. Hey, but that means that this one has to be kind of minus 1.25, right, on the other side. So I'm going to go up here, minus 1.25. I want to make it equal, right? And then minus 1 and 1. So that's kind of good. Now let's go to this one. Okay, this one is 1 and minus 0.5 and 1. That's what this one is. 1 minus 1. Okay, we're good there. How about this one? 0.87. Let's make that 0.85, 0.85. There we go. And minus 0.5, we'll make that 0. Right, and this is 1. And I'll do the same thing for this one. So I'll say, you know, instead of minus 0.88, it'll be minus, I was pretty close, 0.85, right? So make it, this one will be 0 and 1. Now you can see that they're identical on both sides. Let's do the same thing for this one. This one, I don't know if I like this one or this one more. I think maybe I like the way that this is sloping in. So this is 0.72. We'll make this 0.75. Just make it a little bit off, 0.75, 0.51. Okay, if this is 0.75, this is going to be minus 0.75, minus 0.75. You can see that that's pretty cool. And this one is 0.6839. It's kind of a weird number. Let's make this to 0.65. Okay. And we'll do the same thing on this side, 0.65, so minus 0.65. Go. And now these ones have to be aligned. This one's minus 0.5. This will make it to 1.25. There we go. And 1, so 0.25. 1, there we go. And now this one, right now it's sitting at 1.76. And I'll move this to about 1.85. There we go. Get our spaceship aligned. Now you might say, Tom, why'd you do all that work? Right? And there's other ways, much easier ways of making this happen. But the idea is that we get the shape, the top shape of our spaceship the way we like it as we're starting to start off. And I notice there's some bottom stuff. Like on the top, we see that it's working out, right? But the bottom, it's not working out too good, right? How do we fix that part, right? Well, we want to definitely bring these ones in to line, right? If you want to align them a little bit more. And we don't have to, but for example, I want to definitely bring in these ones, this one, and this one. You know what? It almost looks like I'm making my spaceship symmetrically. Well, if I'm doing something symmetrically, that kind of calls for almost like a mirror modifier. And I recommend a mirror modifier. So let's talk about what that is, right? So again, I'm going to realign this thing. So notice how I'm a little bit off. I want to realign this thing so I'm top ortho, right? So it's fully aligned. And now let's toggle wireframe on and off. So if I toggle my wireframes on and off, it looks like this. On, off, right? So here's my wireframes. Now, why am I going to do this? Why? Because I can see right through the entire shape. And I want to get rid of everything else on the left. So there's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to just deselect all. And I'm going to click on B, so for B select mode, right? And if you notice, I'm going to select everything from the middle to the left. Okay, there's my middle part of my ship. Now, if I get rid of it, I can get rid of the half of the ship by pressing X. The X button will get rid of everything, X. If I click vertices, I'm in trouble. I'm only left with this, right? That's not really what I wanted, right? So let me just undo that, right, with a Control Z. What I really want to get rid of here is faces. So when I click the X button and then click faces. Now I'm left with half the ship, which looks like this. Why would I want to do that? I want to do that because now I can model symmetrically. And I'll show you how to do this in a second. So I'm going to kind of click on the top. And you can see that I've got the shape of this part, but this part needs to be changed up. I'm not going to change it right now because I want everything else to align, right? So I want to select all by pressing the A button. And then on the right of my tabs, I'm going to scroll to the right, and I'm going to select my little wrench. Do it with me, guys and girls, right? And if you notice here, when I click on this, I can add a modifier, which is my mirror modifier. Uh-oh, now look what I got. I got my ship, and it's been mirrored completely, right? This is really cool for organic-looking objects. Like, for example, things like faces, spaceships, things like that, that you want to kind of do that or have a symmetry about them. Cars will be another one you want to do. Guns, anything you want to do on both sides. It's identical, and you can actually save half of your modeling. I highly recommend it. The bad thing about this is that the middle, if you mess around with the middle vertices, right, you can create like spaces and holes in your model. So be careful when you're modeling. Okay, I've got this all selected. I want to deselect all, and I want to go back into solid mode. So this, I've moved from wireframe to solid mode by pressing the Z key over and over again. So I can kind of bounce in and out of that, right? So I'm going to go back to top mode, and I'll notice that I've got everything modeled here, but I got a problem with my stuff over here. So I want to kind of select these vertices here, and I want to start modeling one side on the other. Sometimes, I want to look at it from this side. This is the front view, and I'm okay on the front view. But what about the side view? This looks okay too. What about the back view? How do I get my back view going on? Well, we know the front view is the 1 key. If I press Control and 1, I get the back view. And this is where we can get a little bit more detail. Because if I look and see what this looks like, you can see that the waist of the ship is a little bit out compared to the front of the ship, right? So what I want to do is I want to kind of pull these in. You can do it in two ways. You can do it from a perspective mode. So you can sit there and go, okay, I want to see what the perspective mode looks like. And I want to pull these in organically by looking at them. Now, the great thing is it's all going to work on this side as well. So if I pull this in, you can see that now I can remodel my spaceship so it looks a little cooler, right? I'm going to pull these in slowly, slowly. And again, on the right side, it looks perfectly, right? And you know what? It's pretty flat on the top. It looks more like an arrow than a spaceship, right? So maybe what I want to do, carefully pull these up. Now there's a problem here. Remember, if I pull these apart, I get a hole. I don't want that hole, right? So let me undo that, the last change. But pulling up is okay, because maybe I want to make my spaceship kind of look like there's a bit of a cockpit, right? Like this, right? And then maybe what I want to just add some like wings on this side. So I want to kind of pull this one up like this, and kind of pull this up like this. So it kind of gets that spaceship looking feel to it. And if I really want to pull out more, like this one, maybe my wings aren't wide enough for me. I want to be a little bit more fantastical or whatever the way I look. This is cool. I don't mind this. Maybe this is too high or whatever. You know, you can kind of go through here and model it so that you're happy doing it. Same thing with down here. I think maybe this is a little bit too boat-like. I want to kind of pull these in, make the waist a little tighter and stuff like this. But it's not looking bad from this part. But what about all this crap? This is no good, right? Let's get rid of it, right? So how do we get rid of stuff? Again, it's the X key, right? So we're going to look at it from the front. And that's not a great way to look at it. How about the side? Well, that's a better way to look at it. And what I want to do is I want to chop everything that's down here off. All right, so I want to go back into orthographic mode, which is very, very much better than what we did before. Click the Z key so we can get our wireframes back. Deselect all, right, by pressing the A key again. If you press the A key, it kind of switches between selecting all and deselecting all. Then press B, the B select mode again. So I'm kind of pressing the B button here and selecting everything, right, that I can by pressing the B select mode. And what I want is I want to click just underneath this part. So I kind of hit all those. And if you actually look around, you can see that I've hit half of the model, right? And this is kind of cool. Well, this is what I want to do, right? And I want to chop all this off. And I've done this on purpose in order for you to see the complications and some of the things we need to do. If I press the X key now, I can get rid of faces. If I click vertices, that's a bad thing, right? Faces is what I want to get rid of. Okay, cool. So I got my little spaceship, right? That's what it looks like right now. I got a hole at the bottom, though. That's a problem, right? Now I got to fix this hole. And how do we fix the hole? What would you do if you were going to fix the hole? Right, because I got a hole at the bottom of my spaceship. What was that? I got to connect the points, right? So the way to connect the points is if I'm looking at the bottom of my spaceship, it almost looks like we're using paper, like a paper model now when we're modeling, right? And if I want to connect the points, there's a couple ways to do this, right? One of the ways is to select each point on the bottom. Make sure you don't miss any, right? And what you want to do here is press the F key, right, which creates a face for you, right? What kind of holds that up. Now, that's a good thing because what it's done is it's showing me that there's some issues with my model. And I want to zoom in there. And again, I want to go into perspective mode to see it. So I want to kind of zoom into my model. And you can see that there's a couple of issues. Like it's a little bit blocky here. So I want to kind of pull this in, make it less blocky. I'm careful not to use the Z-axis because that'll raise it up higher or lower, right? But I want to kind of make it a little less blocky. Same thing with this one. I kind of make it a little bit more curved, right? A little more curved at the front. And I just made a boat. Yeah, I made a boat. But again, you know, it's a very simple model, right? Because we're going to use it for 2D too if we want to. I'll pull this one in a little bit more. And more. Again, I'm only looking at the X to pull it in while we're doing the modeling piece, right? So it's kind of, you know, kind of pulling it in more a little bit. And if I want to make it tighter, like or longer in the front, because I think it's maybe not as long as I wanted to make it, I could do that. I could kind of pull this off and make this as long as I want, right? My spaceship, not too long, right? And maybe the wings aren't quite long enough. I can do that too. I can move them out now a little bit more. And I can make them flatter. Like I can make this a little bit flatter by pulling this a little bit up if I want to. Got to be careful though what it does to my back, right? My back end. Now this is good. It's a very good start, right? Because you know we have a shape. Later on in this course, we're going to be talking about materials and all the things that you guys know already. But I'll be introducing it slowly. So when it comes to the blender, you can close one eye if you want. But there might be some ways I do it a little differently than Arbin Arbor does it cool, but you know, I do it my way. So you might, you know, it might also be a little bit of a refresher. I got my spaceship, right? Which is kind of cool. Let's take a short break, and when I come back, what I want to do with it is I want to import it into Unity, right? So I want to bring this shape into Unity. Okay, so let's take a short break, and then let's take about 15 this time around, because I think we're going 4 hours here, guys, right? Take about 15 minutes, and then come back. Maybe people with that have coffees or whatever. I'm going to eat something, and then when we come back, we'll continue with bringing things into Unity.